a story about a woman, a mother. It's a story about one woman and one sentence, and not the kind of sentence with punctuation and grammar. And it's a different kind of sentence. It's a prison sentence. And as I tell you the story, please think of the fact that we have 3 million children under the age of 10 with a parent in prison in this country, which is larger than the state of Delaware. It's larger than San Francisco. So this woman needed help. If she were out here, she would have treatment, she would get counseling. She had the disease of addiction and alcoholism. And without knowing many people here personally, I can say that you know about this disease because it is everywhere. It touches all of us, whether it is us or it is someone in your family or someone you know or in your children's school. So she needed help, and instead she received prison sentences, one after the other, because she acted out her addiction and alcoholism in the community, which is exactly what an addict and alcoholic does, without treatment, without mental health care, without being embraced by a community. I know about this from the inside out because I travel the country speaking in prisons. Last week I was in Houston prison. I was in a corrugated steel building with 600 women. There were no windows. It was in Texas, Houston, Texas. It was 95 degrees out, and we were smoking hot. And there were 2,500 other women in the compound, but we were in this building. I was on stage in front of 600 women. 300 on my left were in for sex trafficking to support a drug and alcohol habit. The other 300 were in for crimes related to drugs and alcoholism. And what we know, and I was there to tell a story like I'm telling now, of hope and information and hopefully some inspiration. And what we know is that 70% of those women will reincarcerate. So we have an $80 million prison budget in this country. And where does that make sense of 70% reincarceration? So I started to think of it in terms of day-to-day life. If you called an ambulance and 70% of the time, maybe not, they'd show up, we wouldn't accept that. And our iPhones, really, 70% of the time we swiped and nothing worked there, we wouldn't accept that. Or crossing the street and 70% of the time, smack and you're run over. It's unacceptable. But we allow it in our prisons, we allow it with our prisoners. I also know the story from the inside out because the mother in that story is my birth mother. On one of her many sentences, and her last sentence, she was pregnant with me. And so I was born inside the prison where she was incarcerated. And the trauma and chaos and pain that impacted was not just one woman and one sentence. It traveled with me into 4 states, into 5 families, into social services and child protection services in many states, law enforcement as it followed me around, and I continued to follow her path other than I wasn't incarcerated. But I knew the lifestyle that she followed. I ended up following that. Part of the story I want to tell is that almost 80% of the men and women and youth I meet in prison are touched by addiction and alcoholism. They need what we embrace out here. So I'm not talking about people on the other side of town because it's become a them versus us. I am in your community. I'm someone that received services and programs. I had mentors, my elders that circled around me and prepared me for a different kind of life and led me in a different kind of direction. And you would have been afraid of me many, many years ago. And I was afraid of myself. But today, I'm in the store with you. I stand in the bank with you. I'm in your restaurants. I shop with you. My children go to your schools. And this is exactly what can happen with the men, women, and children that I meet in prison if we surround them with a collaboration of community, courts, and Department of Corrections providing services, not just incarceration. So I'm encouraging people everywhere I meet to rethink incarceration, because many people say, so what can we do? Well, people work with policy, and that's important, but part of rethinking incarceration is thinking that it is us, and it's okay in our community to embrace and bring in people from the outside inside. Last week also, I was talking to judges. I was part of a judges conference. Most everyone I know agrees that we need treatment. We need mental health resources. We need beds. Judges want to send someone other than to prison, but there aren't beds. So I propose that we have community collaboration with mental health resources. You know, across politics now we've seen a great collaboration between parties. I started this work 10 years ago because I knew it was a case of body, mind, and spirit, that if the work started on the inside, that we would start having fewer and fewer people in prison. One of the things I see, and I'll tell you some of the questions, I started gathering queries from the men and women and youth that I meet. Everything I hear, and it isn't what you imagine. I hear questions like, how do I forgive myself? How will society forgive me? What do I do with the pain when I get out? What do I tell my children? So I started, as I traveled the country, seeing the humanitarianism that we needed to address and not more laws to lock up people that need help. So the story of my mother ended well in that she cleaned up. The story that you know by inviting me into your community and into TED is that I've been able to change a life path and follow that. And so I propose that sometimes in this community there are suggestions and offers for group homes, for treatment centers. There's a need for volunteers. There's a need for literacy. The average grade level for reading is 5th grade in prison. So why is literacy an entitlement that we have out here? So part of the work I do is to teach reading and to use books as a part of reading and enhancing literacy. The women I meet mostly have children. The men I meet have children. And so when we think about one sentence and one person incarcerated, it trickles and ripples into millions of dollars across states and families. It draws on resources. The number I've heard is that for every dollar we spend in re-educating ourselves and those in prison, we save 7 tax dollars. So it is not a political thing. I'm not about what happens with the policy. It is absolutely about the people that we lock up. I have a story that I tell frequently, and I'll close with this story. My youngest daughter is 15. And part of the message I do is that I like to work with youth and take the stigma and shame against addiction and alcoholism and also incarceration. I've also had people say to me, well, you don't look like someone born in prison. So what is that? I'm going to ask that when you think about that and when you read articles about people, that you think of what you see, that I'm in your community, I'm working with you, I'm in your families, I'm with you all the time. So my daughter will tell stories like, well, my mother's going to work in prison today. Or she'll forget the work part and she'll say, she's going to prison today. And so in the beginning, I was shocked to hear that because then I'll have parents come up to me and will say, we heard you were in prison last week. And it becomes kind of this conversation thing. But part of the biggest message that I have is to break the stigma and shame around incarceration. If we had treatment for everyone that went into prison, the numbers aren't high. I'm learning that that's always successful, but why don't we try? The first stroke is often sent to prison. I have met judges that said, we really don't want to send them there, but there's nowhere else to do that. So in our community, and I'm doing a pilot, there are 2 states that have pilots already, and they're successful. In our city and a couple other cities that I'm in, we're looking into pilots, but it needs people to support it. The partners are Department of Corrections, of course the prisoners themselves and their families, treatment centers, the courts, and mental health professionals. And that's just common sense. We're all out here, so why don't we all walk together? So when you think about who is behind prison, you might not be sitting next to them, but they are the same human beings. They have the same pain. They ache and they mourn and they yearn for a better life just like you do. And I feel that I was born into where I was for the purpose of carrying this message. Thank you very much.